Hey friend, welcome back to the Created Worthy podcast. I am your host and fellow worthy warrior, Danielle Damrell. On this show, we are creating space for genuine connection by unifying women of all ages, backgrounds, and experiences. So grab your favorite drink and get ready to listen as we take a deep dive into our stories, making sure to honor and protect them in the process. We will also uncover the threads of creative processing that have already played a part in each of our lives. When we know how to utilize this as a skill, we can continue growing into the joy-filled, triumphant women we are created to be. You are created worthy. Hello, welcome back. This is the 50th episode of the Created Worthy podcast, and today I am joined by a very special guest and worthy warrior, Blake Guichet. Blake is a best-selling author, podcaster, and the founder of the Crappy Christian Co., which aims to teach women how to use their God-given gifts for the kingdom. She is also the host of the popular podcast, Confessions of a Crappy Christian, a weekly show that specializes in conversations with guests about their passions, struggles, and all the things they aren't sure that they can talk about. Blake is a proud Enneagram 8, American history buff, and playlist enthusiast, and her primary goal in all aspects of her ministry is to tell the truth while always pointing people to Jesus. I have personally been listening to Confessions of a Crappy Christian podcast pretty much since it started. In 2018, I was still a new entrepreneur, a new wife, and definitely felt like I fit into the crappy Christian category. When I stumbled across Blake's podcast, it was like a light bulb kept coming up in my mind and head every single week with every new episode that she released. I've been listening for the last 4 years, and she was a huge inspiration behind my desire to start this podcast. Earlier this year, I had the absolute honor of having Blake as my business coach, and from the moment we met on Zoom, we connected. To be honest, it was actually really weird how much we had in common. And then she released her book, and things got even more weird because I realized how many more things we had in common. In the 12 weeks that we worked together, she really helped me to work through some of the mental blocks that I've been held back by for far too long. Let's just say things were looking pretty bleak earlier this year, and by the end of the Insiders program, I was fully remotivated to keep pursuing the crazy dreams I believe God has planted in my heart and mind to serve others and point people back to true freedom. All that to say, having Blake on this podcast is truly a testimony of grace and God's provision. Blake, thank you so much for joining us here today on the Created Worthy podcast. I can't wait to hear more about your real life and story.
Oh my gosh. Were you trying to make me cry right before I have to talk on a podcast? That was so kind.
That's always the goal. I'm just joking.
Mission accomplished. But
well,
it's just so cool.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm so excited.
So I would love to just start with a quick little recap of where you're from and what life looked like for you growing up.
Yeah. So grew up in one of the few like intact homes of my generation. My parents are still married. I'm pretty sure they just celebrated the anniversary of like their 38th year of their first date. They're freaking adorable. And so grew up in a Christian home. They both love Jesus. But unfortunately, we were going to a really legalistic church. I think my parents understood and grasped grace and the finished work of the cross. The church we were in didn't very much. So I kind of grew up with these like two conflicting messages, right? Theology of grace and a theology of law. Yeah. But I see a lot of myself in my eldest daughter, which is the gregarious, vivacious, command the room, all of that. I was always the loudest one. I jokingly called it like a megaphone amongst whispers, and it's still that way today. But had a great childhood and a great, high school years with its stuff for sure. Like, I think
all have it.
Exactly. Like, I think growth and maturity are being able to look back and say, my parents did the best with what they had. It wasn't perfect, but they did the best with what they had. If they did, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes people had parents that didn't do the best with
Right.
what they had.
Fair.
But I'm very lucky, very blessed to have a really incredible family and really incredible like starting place.
I love that. I listened to a podcast of yours recently where you talked a little bit about being bullied when you were younger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Specifically, I think in third grade. No, it
Mm-hmm.
was in your book that you were talking about it.
Yes, I went to a private Christian school from kindergarten to 4th grade, and by 4th grade my parents had to pull me out of it because I was just being bullied so relentlessly for I mean everything from my name is Blake, and at the time that was not cool. It's cool now, but
Yeah.
it was not cool then. It was a boy's name then. And I was kind of weird, but like not in a weird way,
Yeah,
right?
not
Like
like a harmful way.
not
Not
in a
harmful
harmful
weird.
way.
Just like
Right. I was
personality.
right. I didn't like the things that like I was never into Pokemon was real big at the time, was never really into it. I knew every word to like every Garth Brooks song that existed, but was like kind of into Backstreet Boys, but like not that. And I preferred to read and do ballet and stay inside.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy now being an adult and looking back on it. And I mean, my parents again like did the best what they had. They pulled me, they homeschooled me, and then I went to a public high school and had a much better experience. I really didn't get bullied. Like it wasn't a bullying thing. And I feel like using that word is such a buzzword
Right.
now, but I mean it was
Yeah,
pretty
I mean, you
bad.
got pulled out of school because it was
Right.
so bad. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my
And I mean,
gosh.
it was in that the Christian private school environment. Like it just doesn't, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Just because you have your child in a private school doesn't mean that they are exempt from human beings being human beings. And kids can
Exactly.
be some of the worst
Yep.
little,
Turds.
turds.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep. 100%.
So you moved into public school. How was that transition from going to a private school for your early childhood and then going into a public school? I assume there was like some kind of transition there that you were like,
It was. I mean, I did homeschool for 2 years.
okay,
So did the 4th grade. I did fifth, sixth, half. No, that's not true. I did fifth, sixth, seventh, half of eighth. So it was three and a
okay,
half years that I was homeschooled. I'm this, like, I'm an ambivert, which I know some people say doesn't exist, where you're an extrovert and an introvert.
that
Like,
totally exists.
yeah, like I can, like I've said, like I can show up and I'll start the party, but I'll leave first. Is how I describe
And
it
you've
to people.
always been like that?
Always. I've always been like that. And so the homeschooling was not a good fit for me. This is before like co-ops were really a thing. Like
Yeah.
the homeschool landscape has changed so significantly in 25 years. So did the homeschool thing, wasn't really a great fit for me. And then 8th grade, halfway through the 8th grade year. So I entered the year halfway through, and all of these kids had pretty much gone to school together since kindergarten. But I went to a massive public school.
Okay.
Well, I went to a junior high, and then it fed into like our high school was a feeder for like 8 junior highs. It was huge. I graduated with like
Whoa.
600 people. It was humongous.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm thankful for that because it like there was enough space for me to slide in.
Yeah.
So I really kind of found a little group of girls in 8th grade. Like when I came, a couple of them lived in my neighborhood. And I mean, can we all just acknowledge that for the most part, high school girl relationships are super toxic and unhealthy? Like it's just not, it's not great. Yeah. But again, like I feel like I've said this a million times, like we did the best with what we had. Two of them are, I was really lucky that my childhood best friend was at that high school. So I've had the same best friend since elementary school. So she kind of allowed me to like meld in, and I really just kind of like bebopped my way through high school and college. Like I did not peak in high school. I didn't really even peak in college. Like I kind of flew under the radar.
So you weren't like the commanding the attention per se in your big public high school, like you were able
no,
to
oh no,
okay.
No. I didn't partake. I wasn't running for anything. I was never on homecoming court. I was not popular at all.
Okay.
I was funny and I was smart.
Yes, I totally relate to that. I feel like
Yeah.
I had like 7 different enrollments in high school for a variety of reasons.
Wow.
I was expelled twice from
Yeah.
private Christian school. Um, so for me, it was like very much like going into huge public school, going out, going to treatment,
Yeah.
coming back, all of these like different things. And I just remember specifically in high school being like, where do I actually fit? Like, do I have any is there any stability in my life at all? Like, even in my friendships, I mean, I had friends and I would like make friends at a school and then I'd go to another school and I was
Mm.
thankfully still able to like talk to those friends, but it was like they
No, but that's
believed very
hard.
differently, you know? And
Mhm.
when I went to public school, like, faith was not something that was like even on their radar. And for me,
Where are
I
you
was like,
from?
well, I live in Denver. I went to school in Denver,
Okay,
moved to
see, that's part of
Nashville.
why. Like, I'm from
Yeah.
the Bible Belt. So, like,
Okay.
FCA was a big Fellowship of Christian Athletes was a big thing.
Okay, so it was like faith was still even a part of your public
Hmm.
school experience.
Yeah.
Wow. That's that as far as like when you hit puberty, because you said you went into public school in halfway through
Eighth
eighth
grade.
grade. That's
Hmm.
the peak of puberty and hormones and all of the different things. And
Yeah.
I'm sure, were you still going to church at the time or involved in some kind of youth group?
A little bit. My parents, when I turned 16, were like, if you don't want to go, you don't have to go. Like, we're not gonna make you go to church.
Okay.
They had kind of been like, you're gonna go before then. And so I went and I was involved, but it was very surface level. I think in part because a lot of the messaging was so legalistic
Yeah.
and I'm too much like I'm just naturally rebellious. Like if I didn't love Jesus, I'd probably be an anarchist, you know?
Yes.
And so it wasn't like I didn't find my people there. I definitely
Right.
found my people more in public school.
Right.
Yeah.
So, with that specifically, what about purity culture? Like, was that still a part
Oh,
of
yeah.
what you learned and grew up in?
Huge, huge. Like there's a whole chapter in my book about purity culture because I was not only getting it from the youth group and I was getting it from my parents. Like, and that's a conversation that we've had to have. Like, they were doing what they thought was right. And
Yeah.
there is compassion and there's grace for that. But it was definitely the whole, your purity kind of dictates your worth and your worthiness. And we did the whole true love waits nights where you sign the pledge and, where, they give you the really horrific analogies of if you don't have sex before you get married, you're like a new car. And every
Did they
time you
do
have,
the tape one? Did you ever?
I'm pretty sure they did the tape, they did the chewed
Yeah.
gum,
Uh,
all of those. It's just so incredibly not only damaging, but anti biblical. Like, that is not scriptural,
mm-hmm.
And so, and again, like, I really can look back with empathy and see what they were attempting to accomplish because I do believe that premarital sexual activity is damaging.
Right.
But there has got to be a way to keep young people away from that stuff without incurring more damage.
And desiring like to stay pure, but for a different reason than like you're
well,
dirty if you're not
which
pure.
isn't a reason. Like,
Yeah.
that's not a reason. I can remember being like, why? Like, tell me that when I mean, I don't know how like explicit you want me to get here, but like learning the biology and science that when you have an orgasm, your brain releases like the
Feel good
love
chemicals.
chemical and
Yes.
connects your brain to that person.
Yes,
Like,
and like soul bonds and like all of
yeah,
those things that I
soul
learned
ties,
about later in life.
right. I mean, like, just to know that would have been helpful. I don't know how much I would have understood it at 15,
Right.
16, but at least give me language outside of like, you will get pregnant and you will die. Like, like I needed more than that. And so I definitely struggled in that area.
So how did that play into relationships when you were younger in your teenage years? Or even throughout college?
Right. Yeah. I didn't have my first real boyfriend until I was in college.
Okay.
So I made out a lot. Like I made out with people a lot in high school. It went further than that like a couple of times. That was out of like sheer and complete terror. Because I mean, I had friends in high school get sexually transmitted diseases.
Mm.
And I graduated with an extraordinary number of pregnant. Like it was a normal occurrence to see girls walking around our high school pregnant. Like that was just, it was very normal. So that terrified me. And so I like didn't have sex out of fear, not out of obedience, not out of a decision that was made. It was out of fear. And it was out of like some strange allegiance to my church and my parents. And so college, I got a serious boyfriend halfway through my freshman year, and we dated the rest of my college experience. And it was really toxic and terrible, but also like it was toxic and terrible in pretty much every way possible. And one of them was like sexually. We didn't actually technically ever have sex, but we did everything else. Yeah. And I mean, everything else. I mean, I look back on it. This sounds terrible, but look back and I'm like, you may as well have just banged. Like,
yeah.
That is a technicality that is holding on by a thread kind of thing. And it took me a really long time to untangle myself from the connections, from the bonds, from the lies, from the pain, from the identity. Because if I was still believing my worth was found in being pure, well, like I really wasn't. I knew that I was. Like I wasn't giving myself a pass on a technicality, right. You know? So,
I almost feel like a lot of times just in how purity has been talked about. And I do think that there's been some kind of cultural shift now. Yeah. And I don't know about in your region, but like,
no, there has. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like in general, in our world, in our country, there's a little bit of more awareness about this language, but it was so closely tied to what you do with your body and not at all tied to what's in your heart. And that's so crazy because like biblically, it has so much more to do with purity of heart and mind than it does to your body.
Yep.
So it's
100%.
So freaking confusing when you're like, okay, I'm gonna be in this relationship, but because I'm pure, I'm going to not cross that like
that one line.
Yeah,
exactly.
Specifically that one line so that I can keep my purity. But then you still feel all of the same things. You still have the soul ties. You still have like that that connection with that person where you're like, but we loved each other because we made each other feel however you made each other feel in your bodies. And that's because it's more of a heart thing than it is at all with your body.
I think I would venture to say it's almost exclusively a heart thing. Yeah. Because so that boyfriend and he cheated on me and we broke up, and Jeremy, who's my husband, and we've been together for 11 years now, and I were friends.
Snaps for you.
Yeah. So we were friends at the time. And as soon as that guy and I broke up, he swooped in and did the whole, like, I'm here for you. If you need to talk about it, if you don't want to talk about it. We didn't do anything more than make out for the year and a half we dated.
Wow.
Until we got married.
Was that like super hard?
Oh, it was very difficult. And I will be painfully honest. Don't think we would have accomplished that if it had not been that that was really important to him. I was like, about it. I'm like, I'm going to marry you anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like, so yeah, purity culture is interesting. I find that I'm still sometimes like finding threads and pulling them off and throwing them away.
Motherhood brings that up, especially of little girls, right?
Yes.
Like we both have daughters the same age. I think your daughter is like a little bit older than mine, your oldest daughter. Mm-hmm. But they're exploring their own bodies and they are figuring out like different things in the world that they see around them. And I feel like that brings up like so much of those ties of like, wait, like, how do I even approach this subject with you? One, you're so young, but also I want you to feel so fully supported to be able to talk to me about that.
Exactly.
How have you navigated that even just with your daughters so far?
I think I am painfully honest and I don't mince words. Like we use the words vagina and penis and this is different and this is what this is. And it's not weird. They're body parts, just
Yeah.
like your elbow,
Yeah.
And I did an interview with Candace Cameron Bure like really early in my podcast, and the whole thing is about sex, and it's talking about sex with your kids because that's something that she's pretty open about. And my kids, gosh, so my kids would have been like 5 and 3 when I did that interview. And one of the things that I learned from her was just talking about it like it's normal.
Yeah.
Like
It's just another part of life.
It's just another part of life. And I talk a lot about like the Romeo and Juliet syndrome, that if you see a wall and it says wet paint don't touch, I want to touch it.
Mm-hmm.
But if the sign hadn't been there, it probably would not have occurred to me to touch the wall.
Right.
Because I would have just assumed. I see a lot of these things the same way, where like if we would stop glamorizing them or making them such a big deal, like the hope is that as your kids hit puberty and do like develop sex drives, that you have made it normal enough that instead of being like, what is wrong with me, which is how I felt, they're like, yo, mom, what's this about? Like,
yeah, like, why am I feeling this way?
Why do I feel
this way? Why did this person say that? Yeah.
Right. Can we talk about, that's my hope, is just setting the groundwork now by normalizing things and talking about them normally and talking about body parts normally, that we're setting hopefully groundwork for that to be our future.
I love that. And just so the listeners know, I will link the episode to Candace Cameron.
It's such a good one. She had so much wisdom.
I think I remember hearing that one. I need to go back and listen to it now, because I'm like, I've struggled recently with like just questions that she's said, and I'm like, I feel like I'm like grasping for words, but sometimes when you have that language.
Right. But there are some things that I will tell you that even she's 8, and there are some things that I'm like, you're not old enough.
Yeah.
You don't have the capacity.
Yep.
Or the language understanding for me to explain that to you. So I promise I'll explain it to you when you're older. And because not everything is off bounds, when I give her that answer, she's like, okay.
Yeah.
Because we talk about everything else.
That's exactly what I do with my daughter, is like, this is a conversation for, she needs numbers. So I'm like, this is a conversation for when you're 10, or this is a conversation for when you're 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just another thing that you have talked a lot about on all of your platforms is friendship breakups. And I would love for you to share a little, if you have like one piece of advice for someone who may be facing that and going through a friendship breakup right now, what would you say to them?
I think I would say that this is a really great exercise for finding out if you actually believe that God is in the business of taking what the enemy means for harm and using it for good. This is when you get to flex those muscles, because if you do believe that and your foundation is built on the security that you find in him, then this hurts. And it sucks, and you're going to cry, and you're going to grieve, and you're going to, sometimes if it's a big enough one, like figure out how to do life again. If this is somebody you talk to all the time or do life really closely with, and it's going to be terrible. Like, it sucks. And I hate it when people are like, you're going to be fine. Like, yeah, you are going to be fine. It doesn't feel like it. What I feel like about, okay, so all of my SHIT hit the fan in 2019. It's 2022. I would say it took me until 2021 to be like, oh, I'm starting to see the ways he's using this for good. I'm starting to see the ways that he's using all of this pain to refine me and using all of this pain to draw me closer to him. And if I could go back in time, I would have given myself that perspective earlier.
I love that. So obviously your faith is such a huge part of what has carried you through all of these hard things that you've faced all throughout life. Have you always had a really strong faith? No. Because I know a lot of people in my life personally are in this place where like they believe in God, but early 20s was like a season of self-exploration. And
Yep.
so they got tied into some of the woo-woo stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're like, wait, I feel so unfulfilled and I don't even know how to approach God anymore. So I'm just going to like keep moving forward in my life how I know how now.
Mm-hmm.
But they are so sad, and there's just depression, and there's like a lack of hope, even just like in looking at some of my close friends and being like, I know that what you're looking for, you're never going to find in this world. So
Right.
how did you navigate that season and come back to the Lord?
So I want to share something that you said about the woo-woo stuff, just really quick. I have had a perspective shift on that recently, that all of that new age stuff is a cheap knockoff of a relationship with Christ. And so the way that I've started praying for people in my life that are immersed in that stuff is that it would be a gateway. That new ageism would be a gateway, because it is going to leave you unfulfilled, and it isn't going to give you what you think it's going to give you. But on the flip side of that, there are a lot of Christians that do not know how to connect with God as intimately as he is available to us, because they won't explore things like meditation.
Right.
Or not manifestation, but like
affirmations.
Oh my gosh. Affirmations, that's God's idea. Energy, that's God's idea. Not manifestation, but the idea of God, change my heart to look like what your heart looks like, and then give me everything you got for me. Like, that's God's idea. So I've just recently in the last few years, or I would say even the last year, started getting more comfortable, like dipping into some of that stuff and like redeeming it and reclaiming it and using it the way God intended it to be used. And I feel like I experience God more intimately now. So that's just an aside about the woo-woo stuff, is like, if you have friends that are there, that's how I would start praying. And if you feel led, like, boldly make those connections for them. If they start talking about meditation, remind them that meditation was like, that's God's idea. Yeah, I meditate all the time. I meditate on scripture all the time.
I want to share something just real fast on this subject. So I also am one of those people who, so my dad is actually legitimately new age.
Okay, yeah.
My family has no like real Christian ties, but God showed up in my life in a really powerful way. But in the last few years, I've been like, okay, I need to figure out, like, because I work with so many people who practice a lot of meditation, breath work, all of these different things. I'm like, I don't know that God is not present in this. So I've been on my own spiritual journey just within that. And one of the things that I do, which a lot of people are like, that's way too, like, I don't know, like, that's not Christian. You're not, I'm like, no, I connect with God how I connect with God, and you have no say how I do that. So let's move on. But what I do is I use like sage, like smudge sticks, and I literally will walk around the house. I use this booklet called God's Creative Power, and in the back of it is like this section that's called God's Prescriptions. And it's broken down into these sections. So to combat worry and fear, there's even one section on like overeating. There's one on honoring your body, just all of these different things. And it's all affirmations that are pulled directly from the word of God, from scripture. And I walk around the house with my sponge stick. I view the smoke as the Holy Spirit filling every corner of the room. And I turn on worship music and I just scream those affirmations over our house when I feel like there is, because the Spirit of God is real.
Yeah. And that's God's idea. That is present in the Old Testament.
Incense, all of it. Like,
oils. So my youngest went through when we first moved into this house a year ago, where she was not sleeping and she was having horrific night terrors. You better believe I anointed that girl's forehead, door frame, and bed with frankincense and prayed every night. Homegirl hadn't had a night terror since.
I need to do that with my daughter's room.
Like, that's not new age. That's God's idea that they stole, and they took their eyes off of the creator and put it on the creation. And that is as simple of a shift as it has to be. Wow. Are your eyes on the creation, or are they on the creator? That redeems everything.
That redeems everything.
It does.
My gosh. That is like such a mic drop moment. I'm going to be processing that for the next month.
To answer your question about my experience, grew up in the church, grew up in youth group. never connected with it. I just didn't connect with it because I had questions. I've always been very curious, and I had questions that made people uncomfortable and that they couldn't answer. And so I was like, this is a crock of shit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is, if you can't tell me XYZ. So go to college. I actually had like a kind of like really cool existential experience where I had made some really bad choices and was reaping the consequences of those choices, and laid down in a field in the middle of LSU campus and heard the voice of God say, "Are you done? Like, are you done running from me? Are you done thinking you can do this on your own? I have so much more for you than you are accessing." And I like literally my life changed on a dime in that moment. Like, got up, went home. My best friend that I was referencing earlier, that we've been best friends since elementary school, had a very similar experience like a week later. So we got to like arm in arm find a church, buy Bibles and like read them and figure out what the heck we believed. And it was messy. I mean, so the relationship that I got into was after that, but he was this Christian boy that was like the poster child of the college ministry. So I thought I was golden. And I also like just assumed that whatever we were doing like was fine because he
Right.
was, you know what I
He
mean?
loved God too. Yeah.
Exactly. But the reality is that I've been mistreated the most by people who love Jesus in my life. Um, so I mean, I was 19. I'm 33. I'm not going to do the math because I won't be able to, but that it has been a up and down, side to side change and seasons. And I don't even recognize who I was a year ago,
Yeah.
you know? So I think we think that it's this duality of you can't ever get more of God. He is available to you. But I think you can be capable of accessing more of him.
Yeah. Exactly. At any time. And
At
he's
any
not
time.
like holding
No.
everything you've done against you. He's like,
No.
I'm here. I know. I
Yeah.
love you anyway. And I
Yep.
want to
Are
connect with
you going to
you.
let that stuff keep you from me? Because I'm not.
Exactly. Exactly. So, pivoting a little bit
Yeah.
into your platform now on Instagram and your book, another thing you talk a lot about is anti hustle culture. And I am trying to also jump on board with that anti hustle culture, but hustle is something that really is just naturally a part of me. And I think what I found is that I think I'm more fulfilled when I'm constantly working or striving to be better in my
Yep.
life or business or family or whatever it is. But how in the freaking world did you possibly break out of that cycle?
Have you ever experienced real rest?
Ooh, what a deep question. No, probably not.
Yeah. Before this year, I would say no. Before I entered 2022, if you would have asked me that question, I might have said yes. I might have pridefully been like, I rest all the time. I took a nap yesterday. But it's not rest. Like, real rest is believing that God is working on your behalf when you're not. Real rest is it does not all land on my shoulders. If I don't get it all done, it'll be okay. I can't hustle and succeed myself into better graces with God because he already thinks I'm freaking awesome. That's real rest. And so our world and church culture, I mean, like that's a whole different podcast episode, is like how much culture, the line between culture and church is blurring. But they don't know what to do with that. Like, people as a whole, like, we are terrible at rest. We don't prioritize it. We label it lazy. I mean, there's multiple chapters in my book about hustle culture because it's my bend. That's my bend. If I'm gonna fall back into old patterns, it's gonna be being wild and loud and not in a good way, and it's gonna be working my butt off because I am going to find some kind of, like you were saying, satisfaction or fulfillment in that. And that is very attractive when it's the only way you've felt that feeling. Right. But I can tell you from experience just very recently that experiencing real rest 100 times better. I will pick that every single day over the temporary high that hitting a goal,
right,
monetary number, whatever, can give you. And so it's been a process. I would say Okay, let me think in terms of dates. Beginning of 2018, I was like in. I was going to the conferences. I was reading the books. I was like worshiping at the feet of these leaders. I like really largely abandoned a lot of like scriptural truth and traded it for self-development truth. God knocked me into my knee face that summer. I went into adrenal failure. Um, I was just a disaster. And that's really like when my journey started. I started the podcast that December. So it was definitely fruit of, okay, I don't have it all figured out. And like, this is going to be messy and it's going to be in process. And it's been 4 years. And I still, I was telling somebody a story about how much I fell into hustle culture recently. I can't remember what it was, but it was like a launch or something. And I halfway through was like, oh, you're doing that thing again where you think it all depends on you. And you think that if you aren't giving 100% to this, it's going to fail. And then if it fails, then you're a failure. And if you're a failure, everything falls apart. Yeah. Not like none of that is true. So I think just like seeing hustle culture for what it is the first step. Because when you're in it, it feels really good.
Yeah. Especially if you're like, oh, like there's opportunities opening and it's like, oh, okay, now I need to hustle a little bit more because this is happening and this is happening and this is happening.
Yep.
Yeah. It's really hard to navigate. Like, okay, now that I do have this much on my plate, like where does rest fit in?
Right. Well, and the great news is that work and hard work are very prevalent in scripture. When I first started speaking out against hustle culture, I got a lot of, so do you think women shouldn't be hard workers? I'm like, what are you listening to? Where did I ever say that? But it's, again, like, where is your heart? Where is your heart? What are your motivations? Are you working this hard so that you can earn a seat at the table? Or do you already know you have a seat at the table and you're just showing up in the fullness of your gifts?
Ooh. Yes. I think that really closely ties into, you shared your favorite verse with me, and that was first, oh gosh, I didn't write down the reference.
Second Corinthians 5:17.
2 Corinthians 5:17. There we go. It is, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest in me.
Yeah.
Can you take me back to when this verse really became a favorite of yours? Was it kind of in that realization of God?
Yeah, it was. That verse is where Confessions of a Crappy Christian came from. Like, where that title came from was the idea of, I don't have it all figured out. I don't sometimes actually know what I'm doing. And I'm really, really bad at some of this stuff. And instead of hiding all of that, I'm going to pull it into the light to give you solidarity, to give you space to say me too. And most importantly, to glorify, show just how powerful he is. Like, the least of these. I should not have the platform that I have. I should not have the reach that I have, because like I have crippling anxiety and I'm the ADHD poster child and I have incredible number of insecurities and fears and lies that I battle every day. But God, like, scripture, the Bible is story after story of God using people that are horrible examples and using them for his glory. And so, you know, Confessions of a Crappy Christian was like a here I am, send me, that came from,
I have that tattooed on my body.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And I made like this sticker that says send me.
Yeah.
Because that's one of my life verses. So.
Yeah, it's one of mine too. It's just, and I think that looks different every single day.
Every single day. And it doesn't always mean like send me to the middle of the jungle in Africa.
I think it rarely means that, actually. Like, I think growing up, that's what I thought it meant. And so I really didn't resonate with that, because some people are goers and some people are stayers. We can't all be goers.
Yeah.
We can't all go. Somebody got to fund it.
Yeah.
I'd much rather do that. Like, I'm not built for the jungle. Okay. But I can write a check and I can pray for you and I can share your ministry on my platform. So anyway, that's I think that verse, I've been holding on to that because you mentioned earlier, I'm an Enneagram 8, which I know some people don't like the Enneagram. It's going to be
Oh,
okay.
we like the Enneagram
We love
here.
the
I'm a
Enneagram here.
4, you're an
Yeah.
8. My
Yeah.
best friend who edits this podcast is also an 8.
Oh, perfect.
There are so many 8s in my life. I'm like, God, I see you.
Yeah. But the Enneagram 8s are pretty adverse to vulnerability.
Yeah.
And every single time I have to show up and be vulnerable, there's a lot of this behind the scenes. Okay, let's do this. Like, I have to like pump myself up because I know it's what God wants me to do. And I know that I'm good at it, but it is hard and I hate it.
Mm-hmm.
I have like a real love-hate with relationship with it, but I know that it's
him
like
sending you. Like,
exactly.
That is the act of him sending you into what he's called you into.
Yep. Exactly.
I love that. So, creative processing. Do you know what my definition of creative processing is?
I feel like I do, but tell me again.
Okay. So, creative processing is a tool that we can all use to activate our creative minds to process a certain intention. So, the prompt that I use is the purpose of enter your creative outlet is to process whatever your certain intention is. And you said that lifting weights when you're stressed was your creative processing method. First of all, I have to say that is so freaking funny because right now I am so sore. Like I'm at it hurts.
Yeah.
So bad to move.
Yeah.
I can't sit down, but I was super overwhelmed yesterday and I went into my trainer and I was like, give me a hard workout. I need a hard workout. And do I regret that now? Like maybe a little bit, but I have to say mentally, I was like on a high yesterday all day long. So I totally relate to that. But back to creative processing. I love that that's what you put in your pre-interview. But I have to say, I think that from an outsider's perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, writing is probably your primary creative processing method.
100%. But I think I sometimes have to do that for like, I have to do one and then the other. So for my birthday was this last weekend and my husband gave me 3 hours on the beach by myself.
Oh,
I mean,
what a gift.
I mean, he got me other stuff too, but like he didn't have to. I was like, this is all you could have given me. And it would have been the best birthday ever. And so I sat down on the beach and I wanted to just like brain dump, like reflecting back on 33 and looking forward on 34. And I had to get up and go for a pretty brisk walk and then I could come back and write. So I think it's almost like I have 2.
It's so closely. Well, and you can have 500, but primarily like that's how I've seen it show up even just in your 100% stories and your books. And honestly, that's my favorite part about creative processing is that everyone already does it. I think it's part of the way that God has designed us. The thing is that most people don't yet realize the power of setting a clear intention to accompany how you're already choosing to create every single day. So when you set that intention, you are using creative processing as a tangible tool or coping skill to bring that clarity, hope, renewed excitement, or whatever positive emotion that you're seeking. And it's so easy to bring the Lord into every step of it by starting and ending that time with prayer or meditation or however you feel you connect with the Lord personally.
100%.
So, with that being said, just for the sake of clarity, a prompt that you could use to engage in like creative processing as an actual practice would be like the purpose of writing is to process marriage or what you were saying, like you're 33.
Yeah.
And or motherhood or a specific friendship or a passage in the Bible, whatever it is.
100% it's writing for sure. Yeah.
And then, but with weightlifting, you could say something like the purpose of lifting super heavy today is to process whatever that specific thing is that's stressing you out.
So that I can put it into words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because when you're able to make it like simple and clear, it's easier to cling on to that truth when the waves of lies just start to invade our hearts and our minds. And honestly, like we all have bad days. We all have anxious days or feel depressed at certain times. And for me, it's been a huge game changer. And for everyone else who I've just taken through any kind of workshop or any kind of sometimes I call my friends and that's a creative processing method.
100%.
I'll be like, hey, I need to talk to you about this specific thing. And we'll spend like 10 minutes of the conversation just talking about that. And I'm like, okay, thank you. I feel better. Now let's talk about anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just that it's really just that act of slowing down to connect with yourself
100%.
intentionally. And that's what I'm really trying. I just started talking more publicly. I mean, I've talked about creative processing, but for me, it's really been like a process of discovery of like taking the 12 plus years of therapy that I've gone through and the personal experiences and combining it into a tangible coping skill that combines all the other coping skills that I've learned so that I can just do it. I'm like, oh, I feel this way. Well, I actually know how, like, I actually have a tangible tool or practice that I can use so that I don't have to feel that way. I needed that immediate, like, grounding.
Yeah.
And it's been a game changer for me.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Oh, yes. 100%.
Yes. And like when you are practicing, and it doesn't have to just be creative processing, it could be any coping skill. Just for me, because I'm like a creative through and through, I really liked pairing it. The difference between like the creative process is that it's tied to some type of external result, where creative processing is tied to an internal result. And that's where like the game changer is. I think that especially for people who aren't able to maybe jump into therapy, like they have financial reasons, or they're not verbal processors. That's another. I'm
such a verbal processor.
Me too. I can't relate
Hence
to that.
why we have podcasts.
Exactly. But for people that aren't, like, this is a way for them to stop, slow down, and still get the benefit of that. I started offering creative processing workshops, and every time I have a workshop or talk about it on my stories, I'm like, first of all, I am not a therapist. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm just here to guide you. And if anything deep trauma starts to come up, I will help you find resources in your area to get you into therapy, because that is what you need. But sometimes I have friends who haven't gone to the doctors in years, or haven't even thought about like, how could I even start getting into therapy, because they haven't slowed down enough to just connect with your subconscious so that you can rebuild the confidence or those neural pathways to move forward and take that next right step.
Yep.
So
amen.
That's my soapbox about creative
I love
processing.
It's a necessary one.
Yes. Well, before we end today, I would love for you to just share a little bit about what's coming up next for you in your life and your business.
Yeah. So I guess if this is coming out beginning of February, I haven't made this announcement publicly yet, but we are about to start doing 2 podcast episodes a week. The regular episodes are going to stay on Wednesdays, and they'll be interview style, traditional confessions of a crappy Christian. And then we're introducing a new segment called the Speakeasy, which is like free speech and freedom are in prohibition. And this is a speakeasy. This is a place to like come and ask the hard questions and talk about the hard things. And so those are going to come out on Mondays. I actually just recorded the introductory one that kind of just gives you the flyover of what is this? What's my heart behind it? What are we going to talk about? Next week, we're going to talk about, or not next week, I'm sorry. I'm about to record the second one, which we're going to talk about Christians and cannabis use and like, what does that look like? How does that like line up against scripture? We're going to talk about gay marriage. We're going to talk about MLMs. We're going to talk about being a Christian influencer. We're just going to like rip the Band-Aid off. Let's talk about the stuff that everybody wants to talk about. It's just going to be me like dialoguing. And so I'm hopefully moving into a new season of really getting to focus on creating content that I love to create, that, you know, maybe shakes things up a little bit, disrupts, encourages people to start having those conversations around their own kitchen tables. And outside of that, I'm very open-handed. I have no idea. I just know I'm creating content and showing up and kind of just letting the other stuff fall in line.
I am so freaking excited that you're
I'm really excited. Yeah.
Because what a perfect podcast and platform that you've built to do that as well. And you already know, you've grown your Instagram so much, you're going to get pushback, but you know, you have the skills and ability to like, I'm going to stick to what God has for me. So.
Exactly. Well, and I think that that's why that's the season I'm walking into, because I have really good boundaries now and I've healed from a lot, that I'm less defensive and I'm much more open-minded. So now it's like, I mean, you can disagree. The whole first episode is essentially me being like, hey, guess what? You can disagree with me and still be kind.
Yeah.
You can disagree with me and still, like, I can believe what you believe and you can believe what you believe, and we can still be kind together. I do it every single day. Do you think
Yep.
that I agree with my husband on everything? No.
Nope.
Never have, never will.
Yep.
He's still my freaking favorite person on the planet and my best friend. We have
Amen.
lost that. And the hope is to kind of usher some of that back into the online space, because I do think it's happening in real life.
Yeah.
I don't think it's translating online very well.
Nope. I would agree. And I love that you're using your platform to build that and create
I'm excited.
that space. So how can listeners best find and connect with you and keep up with all of the things that you are doing?
Yeah, my website is thegirlnamedblake.com, and I'm the girl named Blake on Instagram. That's pretty much the only social media that I'm active on. I have all of these aspirations of being better on other platforms, and I'm just not. So
it is what it is. There's a time and a season for everything, right?
Exactly. Maybe one day I'll show up on TikTok, but for now, Instagram is about all I can muster. So
I'm a firm believer in, like, just show up where you are most comfortable and called.
Yep.
And show up well and serve those people to your best ability.
Yep.
Yes. Well, Blake, I am so grateful to have spent some time with you here today and for your courage and vulnerability to share your heart and your story. Please keep showing up and guiding others towards utilizing their God-given gifts for the kingdom. You, my friend, are created worthy. Thanks for tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. If anything in today's show resonated with you, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show, and it also expands the impact, messages, and stories that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. If you're on social media, I want to personally invite you to continue the conversations about these important topics that we're talking about. You can find Created Worthy on both Instagram and Facebook by just typing in Created Worthy Podcast. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, you are created worthy.